And happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome on in here to Thursday Night Live at AU Club, presented by Auburn Undercover here. Nathan King with Jason Caldwell. It's going to be a great Saturday, of course, on the Plains for Auburn football getting the SEC night game against the number 15 Texas A&M Aggies. Jason, this is the type of game Auburn's been waiting on this season, their first and only SEC night game on the year. And look, it's a team that's they're in do or die mode here toward the end of the season, but this is the exact kind of atmosphere you're going to want. And similar. It doesn't have all the same earmarks, but sort of similar to the Texas A&M game 2 years ago, where look, you're just going to go out and play loose, try to play the role of spoiler, and obviously get a win in front of a big home crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate everybody coming out. It's great night tonight. A little cool outside, but it finally feels like football weather for the first time, and it's going to be cool Saturday night. Looking forward to that. And yeah, you're right. It's a great opportunity. Should be a really good atmosphere. First off, like last week, ULM 3-6 team at 11:45 in the morning, and I thought it was an incredible atmosphere considering kind of the time, who you're playing, all those things. The fans showed up, and you're right. There hasn't been an SEC night game all year, and now you get an SEC night game at home for the first time, and it should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that, and it's a great opportunity for Auburn. You look at it and trying to find that signature win. This is an opportunity to have a signature win this season and kind of give you a little bit more momentum heading into the next week against Alabama. That one will take care of itself, but I think this, again, we talked about it all year. Auburn has given themselves opportunities to win games all season. This is another very winnable game for Auburn, even though A&M comes in as the number 15 team in the country in the playoff poll.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear what people think of Auburn's ability as a team. The fact that, again, number 15 team in the country, Auburn's 4-6 on the year, and they're only a 2.5-point underdog. In this game, it also tells you what people think of the advantage they could have in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Yeah, Jason, you've got to win both games here. Obviously, it would be two of their best wins, probably two of the best wins of the Hugh Freeze era. In order to get these last two games, winning in Tuscaloosa is going to be extremely difficult. Obviously, you haven't done that since Cam Newton was playing quarterback for you, but you've got to take it one game at a time here at the end. This matchup in particular, Jason, A&M is a really, really interesting team, one that still has playoff aspirations. This is absolutely a game that can knock the Aggies out of it because it would put them on 3 losses on the season. One thing you've been talking about a lot this week is Texas A&M is going to have to come in here focused on this game. Looming next week is the huge matchup against Texas. Not only are they excited to have that rivalry back after it was gone for several years, but it could be for a trip to the SEC title game. We had a little bit of a slip-up from Mike Elko this week saying that they were completely focused on Texas.
Yep.
Obviously, it was just a little bit of a slip of the tongue. But they are going to have to be a focused team and take Auburn seriously on Saturday because I think Auburn has the potential to sort of ride that home crowd. And, again, the Aggies have all the pressure in this game.
Make no mistake about it. This is as intense a rivalry as Auburn-Alabama is from Texas A&M's side. I don't know that Texas treats it quite the same, but for A&M, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, what would happen if Auburn and Alabama had switched conferences and you had not played in 13 seasons, and all of a sudden you look up next week and potentially you could be playing for a playoff berth in that game? What would it feel like in the state? Now, Texas is very different. There's so many other things going on. It's not just college football in the state of Texas, but there's no question about it. I mean, they played videos last week of Texas' last game in College Station during the game last week against New Mexico State. Again, the national folks have already kind of talked about this one as being a playoff matchup next week. And Saturday, A&M will play hard. They will be engaged, all those things. But all it takes is a little bit of a think ahead during the week, and you can have some issues. And so we'll see what happens. I mean, they did not have a big game last week. They were able to kind of move forward. But, man, with that game looming next week, you have to think that – and I know it is on the fans. People are already talking about that game next week, and it's hard not to think ahead a little bit. It's just human nature. When you come in and you're playing a 4-6 team, if you're A&M, you have the benefit of watching the game on tape. And you watch this Auburn team, and it does not look like a 4-6 football team. That's the one thing about it. If you came in here and this is an Auburn team that had been blown out a bunch and weren't playing close games, that hasn't been the case for this team. So
right.
I think that's one way that from a coaching standpoint, you should be able to get guys' attention going, look, I'm telling you, this is not going to be easy. And we know Jordan-Hare Stadium. We know it's not going to be an easy one coming in Saturday night. And for Auburn to go make some plays, give yourself a chance to win and try to get over the hump for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, over the hump. That's something that this team hasn't been able to do against quality opposition for really the better part of the last 2 seasons. And obviously they're still looking for a signature win in the Freeze era. They haven't beaten a team that's finished with a winning record since their last ranked win. They beat Ole Miss here at home in a cold night game in October back in 2021. Jason, let's talk a little bit about Auburn against ULM, kind of what we saw from this team last Saturday. There were some questions. You and I talked all week about whether Peyton Thorne would be the guy. Goes out there, you reported on Friday that he would be the starter. All he does is go out there and throw 5 touchdowns. We heard Hugh Freeze talk about it this week. What do you think they can take from a performance like that? And what are some wrinkles that you saw against ULM that you can tangibly want to carry forward? Because obviously it is such a difference in the level of opponent.
Yeah, I don't know that you take anything from an X and O standpoint. The biggest thing is confidence. You take confidence in for the first time in quite a while. I mean, we saw it against Kentucky, but even then it was really more, hey, we're going to hand the ball off a bunch, and that was it. We saw them make plays in the passing game for the first time and have some confidence. I think the thing I take away from it is we saw Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons, and those guys moving around and not just lined up in one stationary spot. They were able to move inside the slot. They were able to move. We saw guys sliding in a little bit. I thought they were able to create some matchups, create some angles, create some routes that maybe they hadn't been able to do before that second bye week. So it's obvious that they had a chance to go back and watch themselves. Hey, here's what we can do. And I think it's something we talked about earlier in the season. We talked about it when Hank Brown kind of became the starter. Sometimes less is more. And we heard Hugh Freeze say, look, we kind of narrowed it down a little bit, not really sure. And some of that probably not really sure what you were going to do on offense depending on Peyton Thorne. And I thought it played into Auburn's hands going, just let your guys go make plays. And you look, and I had a question in my mailbag for tomorrow. Somebody asked about Auburn's matchup with A&M's DBs and linebackers. Look, I think Auburn's wide receivers are as good as anybody's physically. They're that talented. Can you get enough time to throw the ball? Can you have success on first down? And if you can do those things, Peyton Thorne can make throws. And we've seen that. When you get pressure, it becomes really tough no matter who you are. That's the thing for me. I look at this game going, can Auburn have success on first down? Can you make a few explosive plays? And can you avoid third and longs? Because that has been the death knell for this offense for the last 4 or 5
years. It's something I think this defense had already started to do well this season. Narrowing the game plan, finding strengths and weaknesses of what you know that your personnel has. I think that's been one of the most impressive parts about DJ Durkin this season. You're right. When it's November, at this point in the year, you want to have your strengths and weaknesses laid out, and I think that is something to take. That's what Hugh Freeze talked about this week. I think the quote was, don't ask so much of them during the week. Obviously, that way they'll be able to have more reps at what they know they're good at. Because this is, Jason, we can sort of start here. Very capable Texas A&M defense. Obviously, Mike Elko's done a great job with this group overall. We know, Hugh Freeze said it this week. They're talented. We know they're talented. They've been talented over the last several seasons. A little bit, I think, of an overall personnel drop off from some of the elite of the elite NFL talent that they've had. But you look at the front seven, and that's not the case there at all. Nick Scorton is a defensive end pass rusher, transfer from Purdue. Shamar Turner, a defensive tackle. In ESPN's new mock draft today, Jason, both of those guys were projected in the first round. That doesn't mention a couple other guys they've had at linebacker. They have at linebacker this season. This absolutely has to be a game where Auburn has to offset that with the running game. They got to be dynamic, in terms of their play calling. You can't just drop back and pass and hope your O-line, holds up in this game, because it's not going to be the case.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough. And you look at it, and this is an A&M team that you start talking about, that defense, and they've been really talented, and they've made some plays. They have done a good job of that. But you start talking about maybe, okay, what's it look like from a defensive perspective? I mean, total defense, they're 47th, and so you're looking like they've given up some plays here or there defensively, and it's been kind of a mixed bag. But they've really shut out. I mean, Missouri game's kind of the outlier for me a little bit when you start talking about that. But New Mexico State, they only gave up 214 yards last week. I mean, these 279. nobody has really gone out other than LSU and South Carolina. South Carolina had 530 yards of offense against them a couple of weeks ago. This is South Carolina offense. Yeah, they're getting better with Lenora Sellers, but I still wouldn't call that a dynamic South Carolina offense. You look at the road games, and Mississippi State had 367. most of that from a passing standpoint. But Mississippi State had 125 rushing. South Carolina had 286. 286 rushing, and for a defense that has negative plays, has created negative plays, and has so much size, that tells me that they've got some issues at linebacker and issues at some other spots.
Yes.
And so you look at Auburn. Can you take advantage of that? Can you create some running lanes? Can you do some of those things? Because, again, if you can have success on first down, this has not been an A&M team that has rushed the passer great. Now, they got a bunch of tackles for loss, but they haven't been a great pass rushing group. And so I think there are plays to be had for Auburn, but you absolutely have to avoid being sitting there. If you're 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 all day, then it becomes really difficult no matter who you're playing.
Yeah, something some of our friends at Gig'em 24/7 were saying today, that matchup with Jarquez Hunter after he has already carried the ball for a couple steps is going to be really big in this game. Jason, 110 missed tackles for this Texas A&M defense this season. You mentioned maybe some of those issues at the second level. They're so physical, they're so impressive looking up front, but they've had some struggles. I mean, the South Carolina game, I can just remember watching it, Lenora Sellers and Rocket Sanders, just getting past guys and sort of going through arm tackles. On the flip side, Jarquez Hunter, number 6 in all of college football this season, enforcing missed tackles. Again, we talked about trying to take some pressure off of Peyton Thorne, making sure he doesn't have to do it all on his shoulders. I'm not saying this has to be Kentucky, where Hunter goes for 278. You want to be on the plus side of 100 yards or flirting with it this game in order for Auburn to have an opportunity to pull the over.
Yeah, I think you look as a team, and you look and you go, you probably need to be in the 150 to 175 range to start thinking you have a good shot. If you're sitting here and you got 85 yards rushing, then I think you're in trouble. I think that becomes a difficult situation for you. So, yeah, it's going to be important. But you got to be balanced. You got to make plays throwing the football. You got to do all those things, which is a normal time. But yeah, the success means you've been able to run the ball on first down, and that's where this thing comes. I think you start looking at this team and the success they've had, and it comes by being able to run it and being able to set up the pass, have some play action, do some of those things. And so I think Malcolm Simmons obviously is the guy that I think creates some touches for. Use him. It won't count as a run. But some of those little quick things to Malcolm Simmons, and I think those first down throws we've seen the last 2 weeks really.
Yep.
Going back to Kentucky a little bit too, but I thought, hey, getting a 6 or 7 yard gain, throwing the ball on first down, getting yourself a little bit of room, those have been really important. And so they're using that short passing game a little bit more, almost as an extension of the run game. I think that could be big this week.
Yeah, those little touch passes that for Simmons count as a throw, but you're basically doing that at the line of scrimmage and in the backfield. Also, Malcolm Simmons taking over starting punt return duties for this team was another trend from that Texas A&M game. Speaking of that, and this is speaking of trends from that game, Jason, special teams is something that Auburn has wanted to improve all season. Got a new starting kicker against Texas A&M and Vachon.
Yeah, Ian Vachon.
Vachon, a fantastic story for a guy. I know he didn't kick that far field goals, but goes 2 of 2 in his Auburn debut. A guy whose football program got shut down at Birmingham Southern, and Hugh Freeze said no reason to look back this week, and perhaps he'll have some big opportunities on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it was as good as you can get. It was clean. Obviously, a little more pressure when you started getting to this week, but he handled it well. He's a veteran guy, has had some kicking and things to do, but I think when you watch them and the things he's done, it looked pretty calm and confident. The thing he's got is a very strong leg, so he doesn't have to push it. He doesn't have to go and try to create some of that extra distance. That was the thing he did. He was more of a kickoff specialist at Birmingham Southern. And hey, to Auburn's credit, Tanner Burns, they went out and said, look, we know we may need another guy because, unfortunately, you look at Alex McPherson, he's still dealing with the issues he had starting. This started all the way back in the bowl game in Nashville in December. Had a little break for a little while, and unfortunately it started bothering him again. He's already been ruled out for this week. And so you look at it, to go out and go, hey, we need some insurance, an older guy, to find a guy at Birmingham Southern. That was a really good move, and we'll see if it pays off for this team, because you look at it, of all the things that have happened this season, you go, all the things, and I think Towns McGoo is going to be an unbelievable kicker. I've seen freshman guys struggle before.
Yeah.
It can happen. I think Towns is going to be really good, but you look at it and go, a couple of short field goals, just a couple of kicks in a couple of games, it made the difference between 2 more wins.
Yes.
So make a couple of those this week and see what happens.
Hugh Freeze talked about that on Tiger Talk, saying that it's not just necessarily the score of the game that those field goals would have done, but it's the confidence. The Missouri one is the one I look at technically, because Missouri scores 21 points in that game. It doesn't change the outcome, but that was such a cascade that ended in a missed field goal there.
It did end the half against Oklahoma too.
Yes.
Where you don't get any points,
No
and you get a chance to kick it twice, and all of a sudden it is such a deflating moment.
Yep.
I thought that was a big part, even though but hey, both those games you also led by double digits in the second half and didn't win. Like
in the fourth quarter.
It wasn't just those things, but it was a contributing factor to what happened later in games.
Yeah, we'll see if Auburn gets in a position on Saturday to let him kick some longer field goals. Again, this could be sort of a defensive battle. It's going to be cold. It's going to be two teams that I think are pretty decent on offense, but haven't necessarily been overly consistent this season. By the way, you mentioned Alex McPherson being out for this game. Looking at the availability report, it'll be updated again tonight, but same old for everybody else. Caleb Burton is a guy that's been in concussion protocol for a while. We saw Caleb Wooden, talking about secondary rotation, did not play last week. Saw him back at practice this week. Giving you a little bit of depth there at safety. So.
Yeah, and look at A&M. You look on the other side, and their leading rusher, Le'Veon Moss, is out. He missed last week, only had a couple of carries against South Carolina. This is a guy that has been pretty good. Now, they've got some depth. On the other side, Reuben Owens, the guy that's been out for the year, is now listed as doubtful. Can you get him back? Also one of their top offensive linemen, Chase Basantis, has not played, listed as doubtful as well. So, if you're missing your top running back, still one of your top offensive linemen, we'll see what happens by Saturday night. But that could have an impact on things because A&M is a team that, much like Auburn, wants to run the football. That's what they base themselves on now. They've got an athletic quarterback who helps in the run game a whole lot. And this is a guy that we saw a couple of summers ago. I went back and looked because we're doing these previews. I went back and looked for a photo of A&M starting quarterback, and one of the photos I found was one that I took at him at Auburn summer camp. This kid from Montgomery Bell Academy in Brentwood, right outside Nashville, Tennessee, and a guy that is very familiar with Auburn. But this is an athletic guy, and I think when you start talking about Marcel Reed, how impactful can Jalen McLeod and DeMarcus Riddick be once again against a running quarterback like that? That's going to be a big story on Saturday night.
It's been a big story this week. Auburn's containment of mobile quarterbacks this season. Hugh Freeze, I believe he said on Monday, they were, quote, pretty awful at the beginning of the year. I think mostly you're pointing to that performance against Taylor Green, where I don't even think he rattled off that many big runs. It was just more about let him contain plays.
A couple of key plays.
Let him contain plays. It burned the secondary down the field, and all of a sudden you're playing on your heels. Every single week, they started to fix things the next week, putting DeMarcus Riddick in that spy position against Michael Hawkins. And 4 or 5 mobile quarterbacks this season for this Auburn defense. And so they've got reason to be confident against a guy like Marcel Reed. Now, Eugene Asante did say this week Reed was going to be the biggest challenge of the entire season. And he also acknowledged they've got 2 straight coming up. You've got Marcel Reed, and then you've got Jalen Milrose. So you have to do a good job of containing that. I asked players on Tuesday what they've sort of done. They pointed to game planning by DJ Durkin, but also Jaron Thompson talked about this, learning over the course of a season. It's almost more difficult in some ways to do on a defense, but they're learning their personnel, and they've done a better job over the course of the year. Yeah, you're exactly right. Amari Daniels, the backup running back, I believe 500 plus yards this season. He's done a good job, but boy, I mean, you point to that big night game they had at home against LSU. They insert Marcel Reed. It completely changed the dynamic of this offense. When they are at their best moving the football, he is at his best.
They were down 17-7, came back and won the game and scored, I think, 31 in the second half, and he threw 2 passes. Yeah. And he was 2 for 2. Now, he was 2 for 2 for 70 yards. Threw 2 passes in the second half, they scored 31 points because he had a bunch of runs, and it opened up the run game for them in a big way. I still think that's the thing you look at. And he can throw it. It reminds me a little bit, this is a better version of what Auburn saw against Oklahoma. I think very similar type quarterback, but this is a guy that's a better version of what Auburn saw against Oklahoma. You look outside, and they haven't been great at wide receiver. You look at Moose Muhammad's a guy we thought was going to be a big part of things for them offensively. Hasn't been that big. I look at A&M, and the thing I always look to is tight ends. Now, they don't have one guy that's been a guy, but had a tight end last week with a couple of touchdown catches. They always seem to find guys that are really athletic in that role. And we haven't seen, because Georgia doesn't have that guy anymore, but even then we saw Miles Lucky have a couple of big plays against Georgia and Lawson Lucky, excuse me. Can you do those things? Because that's where those athletic linebackers, you have to worry so much about the quarterback. It brings in some of those open holes for the running back plays, all that. So there's a lot that goes into it when you have a guy that's that dynamic on the other side.
I think your comparison is correct, talking about the Oklahoma game and what they faced the quarterback. This is less about a guy who's going to scramble side to side, and that zone stuff they do is really, really good with him. So, I mean, they're trying to gash you up the middle and open things up there, and obviously he has the speed to take it past that second level. It's going to be a big game for Auburn's DBs, obviously this entire defense. Cyrus Allen, we're talking about the availability report. Mike Elko said earlier this week he's out for the season. I believe that's their third leading receiver on the year. And then, look, A&M wanted to upgrade their receiving core on Auburn's side of things. They've got two guys who almost went to Texas A&M. They got Cam Coleman, who was committed there. I believe A&M finished second for Keandre Lambert-Smith. There might have been somebody else in the mix there as well, but obviously somebody they wanted to bring in this season. Touching real quickly, Jason, we talked about him this week, Keandre Lambert-Smith. He's got an opportunity here to. He's already made the best of an overall disappointing season for this team. He has made the best of his opportunity. I just think that was a revelation of a pickup for them. One of the better transfer pickups of the last few years. And look, I think he's going to play. He's played his way into probably a decent NFL draft selection. And when you look at Auburn receivers all time, he's done a decent job breaking into the top 10 of several single season categories. And he's got 8 touchdowns on the year. That ties for the SEC lead. We'll see what he's able to do moving forward. An opportunity for a guy to be Auburn's first All-SEC receiver since Sammy Coates in 2014.
Yeah, it's a shame for guys like him and Jarquez Hunter, some others, that they didn't finish off a couple of games. If you're sitting here and if it was just Oklahoma and just Missouri, and you look up right now and you're 6-4 going into these last two, it changes the narrative completely about Keandre Lambert-Smith. I mean, you look at the season he's had. It's going to be really hard for somebody to go, yeah, that's the guy I'm plugging in one of those places. Obviously, you look at Missouri and you look at other players, but you look at what he's done. And here's the thing I like, and this is the last home game for a bunch of guys. There's going to be a big group of seniors. A lot of those guys are guys that were not recruited initially at all. They've been on campus for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. The thing I like, and I'm going to start with Peyton Thorne, because I don't know how many people realize it, but that guy comes and talks to us every Tuesday.
Yep.
Good, bad, or indifferent. After the game, every Saturday, he comes to talk to us, good, bad, and indifferent. To see a guy that stands up and says, hey, I got to do better, or to me, it's in this day and age where so many things are like, well, I'm going to blame it on somebody else. That guy just keeps coming back and talking to the media, and I think it's great. But Keandre Lambert-Smith has been good. But, I mean, Eugene Asante, and you think about all the guys that have come through here that are short-termers, and then you think about a Luke Deal that's been here for 6 years, and a guy, he was talking about it like him and Bo Nix came in together. We were having this conversation the other day, and he said, look, he still keeps in touch with Bo and still talks to him and talks to him every week. But I think about just how different rosters are built now and how important buy-in is. That's the one thing about this team. It hasn't worked out well on the field, but these guys haven't stopped playing, and they continue to grind, and they enjoy being around each other. And I think that's an important part of this building a program process versus building a team process. And it hadn't paid off as much this year, but it sure feels like that this is a foundation that they've helped to build to kind of get prepared for these next few years.
Yeah, lots of different types of guys in the senior class that we'll see honored at Senior Day on Saturday. You talk about somebody like Jarquez Hunter, again, a guy who feels like he's been here for a million years. He's only a fourth year senior. It's because he got on the field so early and started making plays right away as a true freshman. We feel like we've been watching him forever. There's some interesting players like a guy like Jeremiah Wright could come back for another season. We'll see if he's honored on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, obviously they would like to have that signature type of win to close things out, because all the way back in 2021 is when they beat Ole Miss at home. Obviously, if you're Auburn's senior class, you'd like to get one as a send-off here at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Jason, if you want to move on, we can talk about the rest of the college football slate this weekend. I think it's making up for last weekend's games. Wasn't a ton going on last weekend. There is a lot of great games this weekend, including a top 5 matchup in the Big Ten that, people have been talking about that game a lot for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and, obviously we haven't had to pay as much about the pay attention as much about the college football playoffs as maybe in some other times. But you look at it and people talking about the playoff role and what goes into it. Is it strength of schedule? Is it record?
Right.
It's pretty obvious right now that record plays a big part in things, but you look at Indiana, and to me this feels like, I know they're undefeated. It feels like a must-win because if Indiana, they haven't beaten a top 25 opponent this year. If you go get blown out at Ohio State, then it feels like that bubble has been burst. But yeah, I don't know that it happens. I mean, look, and we saw Ohio State's now down 2 starting offensive linemen from what they were to begin the year. They've got some depth, but they also had to go get a transfer to jump into that line to begin with. And I don't know, Ohio State hasn't blown me away with how good they've been. I think it's a really interesting football game to watch, and obviously a lot of eyes are going to be on it. I think there's some really good ones in this league as well.
Yes.
When you look at it. Honestly, I think the Ole Miss Florida game is very intriguing because of the way Florida's played the last couple of weeks, the confidence they have, and having to go down there. That is not an easy place to play at any time. I talked to some folks that cover Florida, and they said, look, that is as good an atmosphere as they can remember in the last 15 or 20 years. It may be even better this week.
Yeah, Ole Miss is not necessarily a model of consistency. This season they've had a couple performances they'd like to have back. The fact that they've got 2 losses in the league and they have one of the better wins in the league now against Georgia last weekend. Yeah, that should be a huge matchup down there in Gainesville. I mean, you look at what Florida could do at the end of the year here. They already beat LSU at home. That's going to end up being a ranked win, even though LSU's out of the rankings now. This could be a ranked win at home, and then you play Florida State. That one's on the road, but Florida State is an absolute shell of itself this season. They could do a really good job of salvaging their season there. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's going to be it's going to be a raucous environment. Missouri at Mississippi State is another one in the league. Missouri continues to be ranked for some reason.
One more week. Yeah. I picked Mississippi State. I think one more week, and then that'll be done. They found ways to win up until the South Carolina game, and even that they drove down and get a score.
Yep.
And so they kind of get, how healthy is your quarterback? I mean, that's been the key for them. But yeah, going on the road to South Carolina, they thought they had done enough, didn't quite get there. After that one, you've kind of, you talked to play. Oh, we're still in the playoffs. We're still in the playoffs. Now that's done, and then you lose a heartbreaker like that. To me, it's really difficult to see Missouri being up for this game in Starkville. I think for Mississippi State, you're looking at it going, hey, you got a chance to get a ranked opponent. I think they're ripe for an upset this week.
Mississippi State has done some good things this season. I think, by all accounts, they're the worst team in the league. But you've seen some flashes. They've got a dynamic quarterback who's been able to do some things. Oklahoma hosting Alabama. Don't know if there's much chance for the Sooners, but Alabama. I think their highs are really high. They've been a little bit inconsistent this season.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma, the defense can play. They just don't have any wide receivers. I don't see how they're going to score. So,
right.
I don't know that one's going to be particularly close once they make a couple of plays on offense.
Vanderbilt and LSU is the other one in our picks this week. Christian decided to go with the Doors, and it's not that outlandish of a.
I can't even remember. I thought it was going to be close. They'd have a shot. Again, you look at what happened right before we came on the air tonight. LSU loses. 5-star, number 1 player in the country, quarterback Bryce Underwood. He flips to Michigan, his home state. Things starting to crumble a little bit. Thoughts of other players potentially flipping as well. And with what's happened on the field, you couple that with what's happened off the field, and that's about as pressure packed as you can get. Because you come in now and the way they played, and you look at kind of the finish of this season with so much promise. I mean, 3 weeks ago, people are talking about them as being a playoff team. And now you look at it going, hey, how much? The question is going to be how much is Brian Kelly's buyout? And it's a bunch.
Yes.
But that's how quickly things can change in this league.
In a place like LSU as well, they are not forgiving. They've got high standards, which they should. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting welcome for him on Saturday after the Bryce Underwood news and obviously how they've played on the field of late. Jason, before we bring in Christian to talk recruiting. Auburn basketball has a massive opportunity next week in Maui. This is something people have had circled on the calendar for a long time. Regardless of how the bracket goes, they're going to play 3 straight strong opponents, opening up Monday night at 8 o'clock with number 5 Iowa State. As we sit here and record this right now, the team's already there. They left at 5 o'clock this morning. It's going to be a full week for them, Jason, out there in Maui. So you've got the opportunity. I thought Chad Baker-Mazzara brought it up in a good way, saying, look, they're almost trying to emulate an SEC tournament type feel.
Yeah.
Because even in the NCAA tournament, you get a day off in between in the first weekend. This is going to be back to back to back against quality opponents. Iowa State is the one that comes up first on Monday. Number 4 is a top 5 game right off the bat. And the Cyclones have been phenomenal defensively over the last several seasons. Bruce Pearl said they have the best defensive backcourt in the country. Auburn's offense has been great, one of the most efficient offenses in the country. We saw Janai Broom go crazy. They've shot the ball well. Got to go out there and do it against a good team away from home, which they've already done this year against Houston.
Yeah, obviously it's going to be a challenge when you start talking about it. But Auburn is prepared. Iowa State has not played a very good schedule to this point. I believe that. I think you look at, to me, Auburn's worst opponent they played so far is better than Iowa State's best opponent.
Absolutely.
So Auburn is much more tested. Now, Iowa State's really physical. It's a talented defensive team. Auburn has played. They already played Houston. You played a defensive team that's as good as anybody, and so you survive in advance. You look potentially to a second round, and you go either Dayton or North Carolina, and you look. Just looking at this Dayton team, they have a win over Northwestern, who's a pretty good program, and then they beat New Mexico State by 21. New Mexico State's not a bad basketball program either. They beat Ball State, and so you look and no matter what, you're right. No matter who you face. Any time in this, Colorado's undefeated, Memphis is undefeated. You know what Michigan State is, and obviously UConn sitting on the other side. I'd be beyond shocked if they're not waiting on somebody from this side of the bracket in the championship game the way UConn's played. But you look at it and opportunity, once again, to continue the brand of Auburn basketball. When you play in the Maui Invitational, you're talking about who has the primetime game. Auburn's got the primetime game in the Maui Invitational. 8 o'clock Central Time. That is prime time basketball for Auburn, and you get an opportunity to go and see what you can do against teams like that. That's a great feeling to have.
And maybe some late nights this Thanksgiving week if you're spending time with family that you'll be able to sit down and watch some Auburn basketball. If they win on day one, they'll be playing at 10 o'clock Central Time the next night, and then depending on where things go, could be playing at a lot of different times. They'll be wrapped up before Thanksgiving, the championship game, if you will.
They'll fly home Thursday. On Thanksgiving Day, I believe.
Yes, flying home on Thursday, and so you brought it up with Iowa State. They haven't. I think their best ranked team, I think in Ken Palm, is like 261. I would say, and again, this doesn't matter for everything, but I think Auburn. This is why you had this schedule. This they're not going in here afraid of anybody, and I think. On the other end, nobody in this tournament wants to see Auburn. Nobody in this tournament wants to draw Auburn with the way they've played early this season, especially with that win over Houston.
Yeah, no, you look at it and you're right. You go UConn, North Carolina, the teams you're playing. Hey, we'll play anybody and we're good at it. But I think if you said, hey, what team is probably the team that can go out there and maybe is the most complete basketball team, other than UConn, which it stands alone. You'd have to say it was Auburn because of the way they've done, having a Janai Broom, having the guys they've added. To me, I look at this one, and Miles Kelly's a really important player in this one because can you find some of that instant offense to score? The defense is going to travel. I think Denver Jones is going to do those things. To me, I think about that veteran Miles Kelly. He's now kind of been back for a couple of weeks after that sickness, and so can he get his feet under him and start to consistently knock those shots down again? We've seen him get really hot a couple times. Can you be that consistent guy? If it is, it makes this a much different basketball team.
I think J.P. Pegues is the guy that people are going to be looking at. I wrote about him today. He admitted it on Wednesday. He said, look, I haven't been at my best playing point guard. Obviously, he's coming off the bench for them right now. But you grow over the course of the season. He told us he's roommates with Denver Jones. I thought that was interesting. So you get a longer tenured point guard sort of bouncing things off of Auburn's starting point guard right now who's been thrown into that role and practiced it this offseason. Depth is the big thing for Auburn when you look at this again, playing 3 games on 3 nights against really, really good opponents. When you get to Wednesday night, I don't care who you're playing, if Auburn's on the losing bracket or the winning bracket, you're going to be beat up, you're going to be tired, but they're going to have Jaheim Hudson and Ja'Kai Howard available as well. I thought that was maybe more significant than people think because you haven't had them the last few games. You've played just fine. But those are 2 extra bodies you're going to have on Wednesday, 2 extra guys to go out there and give you some minutes. Should be fantastic. Should be a great week of basketball out there in Maui. Jason, we want to close out and talk about recruiting this weekend. Auburn again hosting Texas A&M. This has become the potential. It's got the potential to be their biggest home game of the season. I know Oklahoma was really big in terms of visitors. That was one they had circled, but this is going to be another big one for Auburn on Saturday with signing day getting closer.
Yeah, this is kind of the last hurrah. I mean, it's such a different feeling when you start talking about recruiting and how things work, because you're used to having December visits, and even in an early signing period, you're used to having December official visits. You're having guys on campus, and you'll bring in a guy here or there. Christian, we'll cover Auburn, Alabama next Saturday in Tuscaloosa, and then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday signing day. I mean, it's that quick of a turnaround to the end of the season. So, in-home visits, official visits, all those things, they're done. I mean, you don't have those opportunities. That's why these visits that they've had during the season have been so important, and they'll have one last chance to do that on Saturday.
Yeah, you don't have that. You don't have, I mean, I think back to last year when Auburn hosted USC in basketball, and they brought a ton of guys in for that. Granted, it could also help you in other aspects as well. It depends on each prospect. It depends on how things are going with them, so to speak. You look at guys like Jared Smith, guys like Deuce Knight, where you're trying to hold on a little bit for dear life at the end and try and make sure that they stick in the class. Maybe you were a little happy that signing day has moved up and you only have to hold on for another week or two instead of having to hold on for another month. So it depends, but like you said, it ups the ante for all these game visits, and that's why it's been so crucial that Auburn gets all their commits, or most of them, back on campus when they do. Guys like Deuce Knight, Jared Smith, both expected to be back on campus this weekend. Pretty much all of the commits should be in town. I think there's a good chance Nate Marshall, the defensive lineman from Illinois, he'll be in. The St. Francis guys, Blake Woodby, they'll be in. Bryce Dees, he'll be on his official visit. And then Darion Smith, the Tennessee defensive line commit, also from St. Francis. He'll be in. First visit this weekend, last visit of the recruiting cycle for him. He's not visiting anywhere else. After this, Auburn definitely trending up. I don't know if something would happen this weekend, but I think with a good visit this weekend, win or lose in the game for that matter, Auburn could get this one done.
We've talked about this defensive line group really from the beginning, starting with Malik Autry, his commitment, Jordan Crawford, and then Antonio Coleman, and look at Nate Marshall. And you think about that interior group, Jared Smith outside, and then you're talking about two more guys this weekend, that would be absolute game changers. Here's the thing about it. These are guys that you go, hey, we've already got 4 or 5 guys committed. Well, you're going to take these guys too if you get them, because they're that good. And you look at, you mentioned Darion Smith, and then Justice Terry, just a freak of a player. You look at the potential and what Auburn is doing on the defensive line, and we talked about offensive line recruiting for so long, but you look at what is impacting college football games right now, and obviously you got to score points, got to do those things, but you look at defensive fronts, you don't have to blitz, you don't have to do these things, and creating negative plays, that's where it's at, and Auburn's done a good job of getting guys committed, and you're right now, Christian, you got an opportunity to showcase yourself for 2 more.
Yeah, Darion Smith, it's been interesting. There's been kind of 2 main names plus Justice Terry has been out there. It's been Darion Smith and Joseph Mbachu. Over the past couple of weeks or so, over the past week for sure, Joseph Mbachu has trended down a little bit. Texas making a big move there. They've been involved the whole way. Darion Smith just continues to trend up. And when you look at those guys, Darion Smith, a high 3-star, Joseph Mbachu, a low 4-star. Mbachu is the project, so to speak. Literally just started playing football for the first time this spring over there at Grayson. Now Auburn's not necessarily out of it, but I think they're putting a few more eggs in the Darion Smith basket. Darion Smith not ranked quite as highly, but he looks a lot more college ready. And when it comes to Auburn, I personally, look, the ceiling is incredibly high for Joseph Mbachu. I'm not knocking him as a player. I think with the right development, he can be fantastic. But if you're Auburn, you need guys to go right away. And Darion Smith is that guy. Justice Terry, absolutely that guy. Now, how much of a chance do you have with Justice Terry? We'll see this weekend, but it's interesting. He's wanted to visit.
Correct.
He didn't make it for a visit earlier this year. Kenyatta Watson is a huge piece there. Kenyatta Watson with those connections all throughout the state of Georgia. And then obviously Vontrell King Williams as well. So if you can get a guy like Darion Smith and then you go into signing day still in it with Justice Terry, I mean, Georgia's the heavy favorite, but you see if you can knock it out of the park with a good visit this weekend and see where things go from there.
Yeah, when you mentioned those 3 defensive guys and a couple of guys offensively that we know of right now, official visit guys, One of those is a name that we weren't expecting to be taking an official visit this time, but Kel Ellis reclassified, 26 to 25, offensive lineman. This is a Connor Lew type guy. We've seen Connor Lew step in and be a starter as a true freshman on the offensive line. Kel Ellis is a guy that has that potential. You're getting him in a year early specifically for that, Christian, specifically to come in, probably red shirt, get bigger and stronger, mature physically, and then be ready to go. So that's a guy that I think to be excited about on this bunch because we really like his game.
Yeah, we like him. We like Sam Turner. We like Bryce Dees. All three are coming in for their official visits to wrap things up. All three of those guys are really solid with Auburn. A lot of solid underclassmen are going to be in. I don't have the full list as of right now, but guys like Jaquez Wilkes from Wadley, Dorian Barney from Carrollton, Jaira Edwards from St. Francis, the top 50 player in the country. He's a safety. Another one of those guys. Cedarian Morgan from Benjamin Russell told me that they have a basketball game around like noon or 1, and that he was going to try and drive over as well. So those guys plus the commits. Jason, let's touch on, didn't mention him earlier in the show, Spencer Dolan, decommits from Auburn on Wednesday night. Something that we had been tracking and we had mentioned and been monitoring for a little bit now. A guy that was kind of a fringe guy in the class. It went to 105, felt like he would stick if it was at 85, wondering whether or not he will or not. Mississippi State has been involved, Miss has been involved. He obviously ends up deciding to move on. Great kid, we love Spencer. Probably a little bit more of a project player, but he's big and he can make an impact at a place like Mississippi State or Ole Miss. So to steal life from Gus, you definitely wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah.
He's a guy who, look, he would have loved to have been at Auburn, but college football is a business now, and he should still land at an SEC school, so good for him and hope for the best for him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it'll be Mississippi State for Spencer, and you're right. I think it's very similar on the offensive line as it is the defensive line, where you're going, look, you're trying to recruit guys that you feel like maybe have a chance to develop a little bit earlier. Spencer's a guy that I think could be an SEC starter, but I think it may take a little bit longer for him. But you look at him, and this is a guy that is going to be driven. He's hungry, and he's got a lot of talent. So I think it would be a good pickup for somebody in Mississippi State. Obviously, for Auburn, you're trying to continue to recruit the offensive line. We've seen Auburn, whether it be maybe look in the junior college ranks for another potential early guy, but we expect Auburn to go one, maybe two offensive tackles in the portal to try to, again, solidify those things. That adds to the number that you already have. So you're talking about 7, 8 deep on the offensive line. That's a hard thing to look at if you're a guy like Spencer Dolan.
Yeah, you mentioned the JUCO ranks. A guy that we have not really talked about too much, and I haven't probably mentioned him as much as I should have, Saquon Miles, the JUCO offensive tackle, I believe from Hines Community College. Been committed to Troy for a little bit now, but Georgia, Ole Miss, I think Florida hopped in as well. Auburn offered him. A ton of schools have been in the mix for Saquon Miles, so I'll be interested to see whether or not he shows up this weekend. On that note as well, this is your last home game. This is your last opportunity to make a splash, so to speak. Curious to see who all shows up. Does an Uzman Chroma pop up? Does a guy like a Herbert Third Scroggins? Does a guy like Isaiah Gibson, Josh Aldridge, went to his game last week, the 5-star edge rusher committed to Georgia? Do they pop up? Who are some names that we have not seen, heard about, mentioned in a while that pop up? You go back to last year, Amaris Williams, he didn't come for a game, but he showed up for a late official visit, then he flipped. Who are guys that we don't know about by design because the staff has not talked about them that are going to show up this weekend? There's definitely going to be one or two of them. Justice Terry is honestly kind of one of them that we know about him, but who else shows up? Who else pops up for the final game? Yeah,
a guy like third, Herbert Scroggins, has already taken his official visit, was here this summer, and, you look at those guys, and honestly, that's what you have to do. Jared Smith, South Carolina's continued to push for him. He visited recently. For Auburn, you continue to push for other guys too, because you have to be prepared in case. But again, those are also guys that no matter what, if those guys say, hey, I want to come, you're taking them, even Jared Smith in the class or not. And so you look at it, obviously, it's a big deal. Big weekend, a lot of things going on. Basketball early next week, football, this weekend. We'll be on the road, Friday night, Southside Selma to go watch the Smith brothers play. And so looking forward to that cold weather game in Selma tomorrow night as well. But Christian, unless that's it, unless you got anything else.
I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yep.
Jason, tell everyone about AU Club, whether they live in Auburn, whether they don't live in Auburn, different membership options for them to be able to join a fantastic, not just a golf club. Yeah, no, this is the night. This is one of the nights when you want to be a member here at AU Club. This place is getting packed out. Good night here. Got the Christmas decorations already up and set up, and
Great meals, great food. Obviously, the golf course, is one of the best anywhere. I love it. It's my favorite place to play. You'll have the NCAA regionals here in the spring once again. But fitness center, won't need to pool as much now until it starts getting warmer in the summer. But come check it out if you haven't. Like you said, it's not just a local thing. You live outside the area, they have come national memberships and a really good rate for those. So come check them out at AU Club. Appreciate you joining us, tuning in with us. We've got next week. Obviously, with Thanksgiving on Thursday, we'll be recording that one at home and kind of sending it out probably sometime on Thanksgiving Day. So enjoy it. We appreciate y'all tuning in. Until next time.